Hey, everybody. It's showing we're live. I've got two guests backstage. Most of y'all know them. Lady Wolf and Newbie, I appreciate you being here. This is going to be a fun one. This is my third show this week, and I'm just getting used to this. I went to my doctor this morning. She go, "What's wrong with your voice?" I didn't want to tell her. So we've got Don Odom and Jennifer Appleton. Some of you may know them from the Bigfoot group, the Bigfoot and other creatures. Some of you have seen them on some other podcasts, Red Creek Mafia, and there's been many more. Jennifer pops up like all the time, and the connection here. All three of us are basically from Marshall County, grew up here, whatever. And there's a lot of connections that we didn't know about. I didn't know about until a few months ago, with me and Jennifer especially. I've been knowing Don all my life, and he's my go-to guy. And so basically, I'm going to bring them in, and we're just going to have a discussion like we're sitting out on the porch drinking tea that may or may not be tea in one of my red Solo cups. So we're going to add. How y'all doing?
Doing great, Robert.
Hey, I'm just telling my hi.
Yeah, thank y'all. I appreciate y'all doing this. I've actually lobbied for this for a while, but I'm glad that we got to do it on my show. So I know that y'all have a lot of history together, and me and Jen, I don't know, we kind of grew up in the same area and
Same house.
Same
house.
Hey, prospecting, and I'm gonna try to say hi to everybody. Richard Jr., Avi, thank you for subscribing, and Miss Vicky. I'm gonna be a little bit distracted because I get caught up in the stories also, and Jennifer, she can be do 2 or 3 things at one time, but I don't know about me and Don. I spit my chewing gum out before I came in here so I could do a couple things. Whites Creek, Tennessee. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, Don, you know where Whites Creek is, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're in, for those that don't know, Marshall County, Tennessee is about 50 miles south of Nashville. It's long. It's not very wide. It's got one county between it and Alabama, and it's on a ridge system that runs through the southern part that goes all the way up above Nashville. And a lot of strange things have happened. And to me, my personal experiences, I didn't know it was happening to other people too. And Don has told me for years, "Hey, you need to talk to Jennifer." I don't know her, because I wasn't even talking about my stuff to anybody but Don, maybe my son. And so anyway, we'll start wherever y'all want to start. Jennifer, let's do this. Let's start. Do you remember how long ago it was and when you met Don and what he was doing?
I was a little bitty. He was my daddy's best friend. And up until my father's death, they were best friends. So Don had a daughter, Christina, that was, I think, a year younger than me. And we hit it off really good. But I think I was about 7 or 8 years old when I met Don. And Dad
we did some trail riding together and horses.
Mm-hmm.
And
he brought trying to fuel my horses, and I used to keep my horses on his place, and we'd ride together. And I mean, basically, I just grew up with him.
And my history with Don, I lived a quarter of a mile from you or less. For a bunch of years, and actually where I saw my first Bigfoot was close to his house, behind my house. So, didn't know the history of Mooresville, and actually when I told my story for the first time, I started getting people, private messages and calling saying, "Hey, don't say my name." But I've had things happen. I'm glad you told the story because it makes sense now. And the most recent one in Mooresville was 5 years ago. Which kind of surprised me because I didn't hear anything after the the mining company, when they strip mined and tore all that up, we didn't hear anything after that. So maybe they moved over that way, but maybe they've always been there. That's not far as a crow flies. So, Don, how did you meet her dad?
Well, that is a real interesting story too. Being the game warden here, back in the early 70s, I had coyotes started moving in, and I had farmers calling me all the time about, why don't you do something about these coyotes? Which I couldn't really do a whole lot about them, but we formed a little sportsman's club, and I had the idea of getting the hunters together and matching them up with some farmers. And I think that was the first year we had a deer season in Marshall County too. So all these guys were looking for places to hunt. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to pair off hunters with farmers that wanted the coyotes killed, and they could work up a friendship and perhaps get permission to hunt on, different farms and whatnot. So we arranged a Saturday morning to have this coyote, and there was about 15 to 18 hunters showed up and 5 or 6 different farmers. And I paired the hunters up with the farmers. We met down in Cornersville, down here on the square. And so after everybody got paired up, Charlie was standing there by himself, and I said, well, hell, just hop in and go with me, And so never laid eyes on. Of course, I'd only been in the county less than a year. And so Charlie and I took off, drove up to where your mother and daddy's old place was, up the hill there, behind Mary Wilson's place, and walked out to the power lines where we could, in fact, Mary Wilson was one of the ones that was calling me about 3 times a week about, come get these darn cows,
You talking about at the lake there?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And so we found a spot up on top of the hill where we could look down the power lines, and it was still dark, pitch dark. And there was a pretty bright falling star that came by. I looked up at it. Somehow or another, the conversation very quickly. I mean, and this is strange for 2 people who had just met, And I said something to the effect of, well, there's a falling star. They no telling what else we're going to see out here, And Charlie didn't know how to take me. Of course, he didn't know me very well, at all at that time. And so he got kind of quiet just a minute, and I said something about, well, we're allowed to see a UFO out here. And we both laughed. And the next thing I knew, we just hit it off right off the bat. And we started talking about UFOs, and we started talking about Bigfoot and some other things. And so found out that he had horses. We all trail rode together for years and years and years. And but Charlie would ride with me at night occasionally while I was on patrol. And that was in the mid-70s. But going back 3 or 4 or 5 years before that, Charlie had already had some UFO experiences of his own. And I think we told a story about David Swanner down at Minor Hill. And at the time, I wasn't, I won't say I wasn't interested in Bigfoot. I just had different things in my mind. And most of the UFOs, there was a lot of UFO activity at that time. And Charlie and I actually started doing our own private investigation finding out people who had had experiences with UFOs, and we would go interview them, spend some time and talk with them, and just right off the bat, what we started finding out was that there was a connection between UFOs and Bigfoot. The people that were seeing the UFOs were also seeing Bigfoot. And so I see Jennifer nodding over there, and her Bigfoot and UFO experiences all jive together too. Of course, Charlie had been telling me about some of the things that Jennifer had experienced too. So that's how we got together. But yeah, I think Jennifer's 11, 12, maybe 13 years old when I first met her. I called her my baby girl.
Yeah, yeah. I think I was younger. I hadn't started dating yet.
And Jen, he has told me for years, you need to contact. I don't know her. I don't, And the thing was, I was kind of a little self-conscious about talking about this. I got over that hump 6 or 7 months ago, and I'm glad I did, because we've met so many people that have had experiences. And so y'all, Jen went on a show and was talking to the guy that I know, and what was that? Somebody shooting guns?
No, it was a car that went down the road.
Oh, I thought somebody crashed. But anyway, so I don't remember how it was brought up, but we found out I used to live in this creepy house in Mooresville, Tennessee, and a lot of the experiences she had that I'd heard about was at this house in Mooresville, Tennessee. And we figured out you moved out, and we moved in a few months later, maybe.
Yeah, I was 10 and we moved to South Rolling Road, and 10 months later, you and your family moved in.
Yeah,
but that's where I had my first abduction, where I saw my first Bigfoot, where I had a lady ghost that would come down from the upstairs every night and open that hallway closet door and peep at me under my blankets.
Y'all, I hated.
Yeah, we lived in the same house, buddy.
I got hair standing up all over me. I know y'all can't see it. I didn't hate the whole house, is what was odd. I felt comfortable in a few rooms, but the stairs, going upstairs, it was like 3 levels, I believe, right?
Yeah, it was.
It had a basement. Didn't like the basement.
No.
My bedroom there was right beside the kitchen, and I had a bunch of times where I don't know if it was just being a kid, was scared and would pull the covers over my head in that room there.
Yep.
And you've told us some stuff that happened to you. What is it in that room, or is your mom where you saw? That
was in my mom. Well, if you went in the front door and you went through the living room and you went like towards the kitchen, there was another bedroom right there.
Right.
Well, where mom and dad were sleeping. But at the time, it was before my brother was born. He was born in 1973. So at the time, they still had my twin bed in that room with them, just on the far wall. And I was sound asleep. Something woke me, some noise. And it was really cool weather because I had a thick quilt on the bed. And I pushed the quilt back and looked and just froze. Just, can you imagine fear and anxiety running through a 6-year-old's mind from what she's seen with her eyes. But directly across from my bed, 6-7 feet, was mom and daddy's bed. Mama was levitated above the bed about a foot. There were four or five grays, just the traditional gray alien looking beings right there, and they had her levitated. And then directly beside my bed, I felt a movement, and I turned my head and looked, and it looked like what you would call a Nordic. He was tall, light skinned, blonde, piercing eyes, but there wasn't love coming out of those eyes. It was hatred. Literally could feel it, like he wanted to reach and rip my throat out. And I don't know if it's because I woke up and saw them, or he just hated me that much. So instantly, my reaction as a 6-year-old is cover my head under the covers and quiver and hope it just stops. But it didn't. At the time, Mama wore a wiglet, which is a small little hairpiece they put on top of their head and pinned it on with hairpins, and then styled it because her hair was really thin. But the next morning, when she woke up, the wiglet was on the floor beside her bed. All the hairpins were in it. She just had her hair done, so she didn't take it off. There's still to this day no explanation of how that hairpiece got off her head and beside the bed. But I remember seeing them or hearing the movement again. And I don't know how long time passed because remember, I was 6 years old. But I remember scuffing feet. So I'm raised up the covers just enough to peek. And I saw them levitate. Mama was levitated. And they floated her back over the bed, put her down, and then dropped the hairpiece on the floor beside the bed. And then they left the house. 9 months later, my brother was born. Was that a coincidence? I don't think so.
Did she remember that, or did she know anything about it?
She remembers oversleeping. She remembers that she'd been cooking a pot of beans during the night, and which was custom for us to do. She just put on a pot of pintos and put them on low and cover them, let them cook low all night long. We woke up to the house full of smoke because she and Daddy couldn't wake, and the beans had burnt terribly. And she remembers the wig being in the floor, and that's all she remembered.
Wow.
But to make that even more, a little more interesting, when Mother and Father got married, they tried for a long time to conceive me, and they couldn't. So somehow in 1965, Daddy found a fertility clinic in Columbia, Tennessee, to take Mama to for a week, and then she was pregnant with me. And she told me this word for word a year ago out of her own mouth. There's no such thing in 1965. I'm sorry. So that, to me, is a planted memory. What do you think, John?
Well, I think you and I talked a little earlier today, and I want to know whether there was anything off limits that you didn't want to talk about. And so we kind of worked through that pretty good. And why don't you tell them about the experience you had, Jen, when they took you aboard and all these little children came up to you?
Oh, Lord. I was in my, let's see, let me think what year it was. It was 2001, maybe 2000, somewhere in there. It was an extremely lucid dream. Everything was real. The colors were vibrant. The colors were almost alive. I come awake and I'm standing in a room that's solid white light, about the size of a high school auditorium or basketball court. And instantly I'm seeing all these beings coming toward me. They all have very white skin. They have very pale white hair. And some of them have extremely thin pale hair. They have the big almond shaped eyes. And most of them the eyes are very dark. Some of them are like a more shimmery blue. But they're children, all different ages. The age range was from mid-20s to 5 or 6 months old. And they're all coming toward me. And I'm talking, there was quite a few of them. And they all just wanted to touch me, to stroke my arm or touch my cheek or touch my hair. It was a very loving experience. They wanted to touch and see and meet their mother. And that's what each and every one of them was telling me here.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, when I was 19, I had a dinner date with my dad. I lived in Murfreesboro, and Daddy lived in Mount Juliet, so I was going to travel down Murfreesboro Road, cut down Hobson Pike, straight into Mount Juliet, because he lived right off the main road in Mount Juliet, with 30-minute drive. So I called him when I left, and this was 85 or 86, way before cell phones. So I remember bumping on with my car, bumping on to Hobson Pike Bridge. When I bumped off of it, it was dark and my headlights were on, my radio was off, and my little boy was asleep in the back seat. But when I had bumped onto the bridge, it was daylight, and the radio was on, and he was wide awake playing with his bottle. So instantly, I knew I had been got, and I knew I had missing time. I just had no idea how much until I got to Dad's. I got to Daddy's. He was in a fury because he had guests waiting on me. I was almost 2 hours late. And for years and years, this really bothered me because all I had was bits and pieces, just vague pieces of memory. So Mr. Don put me under hypnosis and helped me bring back that experience. And what happened was when I bumped onto the bridge in the car, got midway of the bridge, a ship came out from under the bridge, came up and over, picked up car and all, went back down under the bridge and closed. So yes, they absolutely have the ability to pick up a moving car because they've done it to me more than once. The last time they did it was in March of 2014, and they got my car with me in it and my best friend in her car directly in front of me. But on that time, that incident, it was the tall whites, some we might call a Nordic, and they are extremely huge. They could pick me up and hold me, and I would look like they were holding a toddler. They're extremely large. And they were telling me that my soul was going to go through an experience in this life very, very soon, and they had no idea whether I was going to choose to stay or go. So at that point, they were going to harvest my eggs. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. They said my line had to continue. Whatever that meant, I don't know. Because at the time, I already had 2 sons. No, I had 1 son at the time. He was 3. And so apparently they harvested my eggs to create hybrids, whatever they do with them. Now, 2 weeks after that, I started having a dream, and I dreamed it 3 nights in a row of me being in a car crash. And I dreamed it just exactly the way it happened, stopping at a 3-way stop, looking in all directions, accelerating through it, turning a curve, and being hit head on. And that's exactly what happened. I dreamed it 3 nights in a row. And on that 4th morning, it happened. And I woke up 2 weeks later from a coma. And I had broken every major bone in my body from my waist up. I had massive head trauma. I had died so many times I'd lost count. Mom and Dad lost count how many times they told me to come in there and tell me goodbye. Then I had a near-death experience during all this time. And so, yeah, that's why they took my eggs. Why my line has to continue, I do not have the answer. Why this torment and this aggravation and this yearly visitations from them has continued, I don't have the answer. I wish I did.
We've heard stories like this all of our lives. And for a long time people would laugh. And then now you have these stories where people go to doctors and they're finding this foreign material inside their bodies and scars that they don't know where they came from. The famous fire in the sky out west, where Travis, the guy that went missing for a few days and came back, they made a movie out of it, and everybody's like, that's crazy. And now, how does it make you feel when
I had to have breast surgery when I was 27? I had a tumor in my breast. When the doctors opened me up, they said never seen so much scar tissue in all their life, and could not figure how, because there's no scar on my body. Yeah. Same thing happened when I had a hysterectomy. They cut me open from hip bone to hip bone, and I'm solid scar tissue. There was no scar there before. They're left speechless and scratching their heads. Well, and the gynecologist that I was working with when I was pregnant with my youngest son, still to this day will tell you, he walks around scratching his head the entire pregnancy, because there's physically no way I could be pregnant. The one and only remaining tube and ovary that I had was engulfed in a solid tumor the size of a softball. David was only 3 weeks old when I had my hysterectomy.
Well, how does it make you feel now that that the governments are kind of admitting that something has been here for years? Now, I've got some stories, people I've talked to, but
total lack of surprise, because I have said from day one that they knew what about the abductions. They were involved in it in some way, and probably very deeply. My father felt the same way, and I know others that feel the same way as well. They're deeply involved.
Well, and what's funny is, me sitting here and having not a reaction, because the first UFO I ever saw, I was about 300 to 400 yards down the road from that house and looking where the back of the house would be. And it came across, went down. No, I've told this before. No clouds in the sky, clear night, no leaves on the trees. I got to see this for a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and when it left, it just went straight up.
Exactly.
I still remember what it looked like. I still remember how it moved. but what's odd is I didn't tell anybody for a while because I feel like, I don't know this for sure, I feel like I forgot about it for a couple years.
It's very possible you have missing time.
And it came back to me. And when it came back, I was like, oh, obviously I remember that, but why I didn't talk about it for a while, I have no idea. I didn't tell anybody.
You suppressed it. The largest ship I have ever seen was in 88 or 89 because I was living in Lewisburg and I was driving back and forth from Lewisburg to Smyrna because I still worked at Nissan. And I was riding back with 3 riders. And we went down Highway 31 to Triune, and then we would cut down 96. Well, that night when we got to Triune, all the traffic was stopped on all 4 ends of that intersection. And there were some people out, but nobody in my car would get out but me. There was a ship going over the intersection just above the power lines that was probably the length of 3 football fields and at least the width of 2. And it was ginormous, not making a sound. It was shaped like a kite. It's very unusual shape. And it just floated ever so slowly over top of that intersection in Triune. And just as it got past the intersection, it turned like towards Smyrna and was like, zoom, gone. They were threatening to leave me because I was standing outside the car looking at it because I'd never seen one up close that was that size or that shape. But it's shaped like a kite.
If I'd had better, more time to prepare, I woke up to a long message this morning from the guy that I interviewed last week, Shelby Lowe, the singer, and he lives over. Well, I don't know if he wants me to tell where he lives. He lives as a crow flies less than 2 miles behind my house, or in front of my house over these ridges. And he was telling about these UFOs that him and his wife watched for 2 to 3 hours at a time. He had to go to bed last night while these things were putting on a show. He texted me, said, Roger, come to this road right now. You'll see them. I was asleep. Now, y'all know how horrible, you can't even take a good picture of the moon.
Right.
With a cell phone. He took this picture with his cell phone. If I can show it, I don't know. It's almost square. It's got a square in the center, and that's his cell phone. He said it was so big and it was coming right at him, but then it changes directions and it moves like it shouldn't be moving. And his neighbors have seen these things too. And so what you'll see is this main one here. He said, but it'll break up into 7 or 8, and they'll move around and they'll go different ways and they'll come back.
Come back together, right?
Come back together, and then it'll leave.
I've heard of that too.
That was last night. And I told him he's doing a concert tonight out of town. And I said, what's the best time that me and my wife might get lucky over here? And he said, well, between 9:30 and 10:30, if they're there, that's when they'll be there. And one of his neighbors, she told me that they've been seeing some strange things before he did. So, and this is not fleeting for 2 seconds. Oh, what was that? It's like we got time to get our phones out. We got time to talk about it. We got time to get scared and watch how they move. And he has no reason to lie. None of us have any reason to lie. And I think
is he over around the Blue Creek area?
No, he's on the other side.
Gotcha.
He's on the other side of the highway.
Okay.
So yeah. That picture. The what?
Between me and you?
No, he's
south of you.
He's probably he's south of me.
Gotcha.
And he's not far. So and I don't know exactly which house he lives in, but I know what road he lives on. I'll let y'all know later. I wouldn't, because I know he's probably got some fans that'll probably show up in his yard, and he might not like that. I mean, he loves his fans, but that's his.
We've been seeing a lot of them up here lately. I've got a girlfriend of mine, Beth, who lives in Lebanon, she's 21 miles from me, straight down Highway 70. So she'll start seeing stuff up over the fields behind her house. She lives in a little farmhouse, and she'll start taking pictures of them, video of them, and then they'll be like they're over the interstate and just go poof. And she'll call me and she'll say, hey, you better get outside and watch the sky because they just passed my place.
You know where Don lives?
Dang.
You know where Don lives right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you go past his house going towards Bobo's Cave curve, around that curve, around the Wilson Hill Church Road, right?
Yeah.
So my son, I don't know if Don's heard this. I don't know if you have. His friend that he saw the disappearing dog with, that's when he started. You know, they talking about this strange stuff, and they got to discussing things because it was really horrible. It scared him, and they were talking about odd things. And he said his family that lived back there had been living back there for years. They have this orb-looking light. It might be a ship. Comes through. It came through for years every night at 10 after 10 p.m. And it came the same route, went right over the woods, right over their house, out, and they would go out. So here it comes, you know, and they would show neighbors. I never heard this, and I live close to there, but it's headed. But the point is, it's coming over them, headed across the interstate. Guess where it's going? Right to Mooresville.
Always. Mooresville's always been a hot spot.
Don, you're the technical guy. I'm sure Jen is too. But I had a question asked to me. Why do you think that Middle Tennessee, Southern Middle Tennessee, is so active with the Bigfoot, of course the ghost, paranormal? That's gotten so old. Nobody pays attention to them hardly anymore.
Right.
My mom bought a new house over here, an old house, fixed it up, and said, "Hey, I'm gonna, by the way, if you come over, I'm just letting you know there's an old man ghost that lives here. He don't bother nothing. You'll see him in the kitchen. He'll just look at you." I'm like, "Are you not wanting me to come over? Because I might not ever seen him, but I don't want to come over now." But anyway, getting back to, is it a magnetic thing? Is it a material underground thing? What could it be? I mean, what's your best?
When I first came to Marshall County, it was in '74. And like I said, just right off the bats, when I met Charlie, a lot of UFO activity from the UFO world. They would call that a flap in this area. Lots and lots of sightings. They were having reports on the Nashville news stations. And at the same time that all this UFO activity was going on, I think one of the first connections that we saw with the Bigfoot was what they were calling the Flintable Monster, which was down there in Moore County.
And for everybody, just for reference, if you ever heard of Jack Daniels, it's south of Jack Daniels. It's south of Lynchburg. What, 15 minutes, 15 miles, 10 miles?
Yeah, TWRA had a trout and a striper hatchery.
I know exactly where it's at
down there. Yep. And so people around the Lynchburg area and the Flintville area started seeing Sasquatch. And it really kind of got to be it was funny in a way, but there was a time when all the good old boys, everybody had a rifle in their pickup truck and a CB radio, and the good old boys were riding around. They were hunting this thing as they were wanting to shoot one.
Did it ever attack anybody or steal any farm animals to set them off?
No. Now there were 2 cattle mutilations. One in Rutherford County and one at the edge of Rutherford and Bedford County. And I remember they made a big deal out of that. And the one in Rutherford County was a Holstein cow in the snow, and there were no tracks around and there was no blood. But the lips and the udders had been removed, and same thing that Linda Bolton Howe forwarded on, many times about the animal mutilation problem. Now, one thing I was going to say, I ran across something today. It was pretty interesting. Is that we talk about the UFOs creating hybrids, harvesting eggs from women. This is not uncommon. It's gone on all over the country, all over the world, I guess. But Cliff High brought something out today that I was listening to. And he said, of all the primate species, all other primates have 24 chromosomes. And we have 23. And what he was explaining was that it's not adding, with some of these hybrid type situations, it's not adding DNA molecules or chromosomes. And this term CRISPR is an anonym for basically how you would remove a chromosome from say a laser or whatever. And everybody's been trying to look for what's the connection between the UFO, between the Bigfoot and humans, and where do they come from? What is their origin? We could have come from them if you look at it from Cliff's point of view.
Right.
Is that they simply chopped off a chromosome that all other primates have in order to make something that they wanted in their image, so to speak.
So is that possible? Why some Native American tribes and people that have studied this for years say that there's, me and Jennifer talked about this earlier a little bit, but there may be different types, different demeanors, different, I don't know, different races or whatever. Maybe you're saying kind of like an experiment.
Yeah, look how many different races we have.
Exactly.
Human races.
Yeah.
And it's Jennifer's had some bad experiences. Now, I think, Jennifer, didn't you had an abduction one time just before your breast cancer situation? Is that the one that we did the regressive hypnosis on, where they had found the tumor on X-ray? You had the experience and then went back and there was no sign of it there. Do you remember that?
What we recovered under hypnosis was when they picked me up on Hobson Pike Bridge. Lou.
I was thinking that was the same.
Lou had
a couple of weeks before.
Vanished.
Yeah.
My tumor never vanished. They found mine when I was 25, and work restrictions, not being able to be out of work, I had to carry that thing until I was on maternity leave. And then once I went on maternity leave with David after he was born, then I had it out.
So the connection, so you're thinking about that, then the connection, what you're maybe saying is removing a chromosome. Who removed the chromosome?
Right. And for what purpose?
Right.
Yeah. Who or what?
Mm-hmm.
Now, apparently, according to him, that he's a guy that is, he got about a 200 IQ, and he was actually had paranoid schizophrenia when he was younger, and kind of cured himself using psychedelic drugs. But he's a scientist, he's an inventor, he's a mathematician genius. And but he was talking about the out of body experience and coming in contact with other humanoid like beings outside of our three-dimensional realm. Um, and he said, best he could tell, there are lots of humanoid type beings in the different realms outside of our three-dimensional realm. So I mean, that just every time we go down the rabbit hole, there's another door that pops open and says, "Now, what do we need to do? What do we need to think about here?" You know.
Well, and two people, the people that hadn't been here before, we've had so many conversations. I don't remember if it was in front of people or on the phone, but he's talked. One thing that struck me probably a couple months ago, was when I was listening to Ron Moorhead. He's the guy that recorded the Sierra sounds, and they've gone over them, analyzed them, and it's a type of language. They're talking over each other. They're communicating, and he's got several of these recordings that he's like, here, prove me wrong, and nobody can prove to be a fake or whatever. And that sent him down the rabbit holes, whatever. But he talks about the energy, them being energy, using energy, the light, the different light, what is it, spectrums, maybe, I don't know. But I don't remember if it was him, but we saw a chart where we see light in this bandwidth, or what? It's not a bandwidth. What is it called?
Yeah, it's a bandwidth.
It's bandwidth, right here. But anything outside either side of this, we can't physically see it. And there's tons of them. The same way with
hearing.
With hearing, there's all of that. So if a creature, now we go back, and these are the easiest ones to bring up. The octopus, how it changes and how smart they are. If some of you don't know how smart an octopus is, or an octopi, go look it up. And chameleons changing colors, who would have believed that? The first person that ever saw that and tried to explain it. So if there's a being, let's say a Sasquatch, and it has a way to control its energy to either mess with our sight, or it can mask itself with some kind of light. If it could just project a light that we can't see, they could hide behind it.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
And that sounds sci-fi, but there's things that can do stranger things.
Sci-fi ain't got nothing. Everything that was sci-fi is getting to become normalized now, if you want to call it that.
It's becoming reality.
Becoming reality. Right.
I have videos of a portal opening and a black being jumping out. And then if you look directly to the far left of this black being, there's already two white ones standing there, and they're motioning like this. Come on, come on, come on. Got it on video.
So
it's a portal. I've got another one of a picture of a portal. It looks like a cube sitting on the ground. I watched the Sasquatch come out of it, holding this huge round orb of light. And mentally, as I'm standing there watching and snapping pictures, I'm thinking, what has she got in her hand? And in my head, I heard clearly, my baby.
So I just had a thought. I don't know. I can't believe I hadn't had this thought before. And there may be people that have. So, Jen, what if your brain, for some reason, is capable of seeing this odd light spectrum over here to the left that I can't see and Don can't see, but I can see over here to the right? And you may have 3 or 4 of these going on. And I saw that Bigfoot that day clearly. I got to see it walk. 30-second encounter.
Right.
Changed my life.
Right.
But what if I don't have that ability to see that light spectrum you do, that you've seen these other beings, but there may be one standing beside me right now?
We all have it. A lot of your psychics and your mediums are tapping into that energy, that stream from the mind that allows us to see what others can't see. But every human being has that ability. It's just dormant in a lot of people. Some people are born with that side awakened. My first ghost was, I was 5 or 6 years old. My grandmother's dog died. She called me down there. It was dying under her water tank in Mooresville. So Mama takes me over there. That's when I was still living in our little haunted white house. And I crawled down on my stomach under her water tank, and I called to Buster to come to me. And he comes to me, and he dies in my lap. I was very close to this old dog, just as close as he was to Granny. About 2 weeks later, I wake up from a nap. I'd gotten home from school, and it was just a routine for me to lay down after I got off the bus and take a 30 or 40-minute nap. And then Granny would give me a snack before I would go home. Daddy would come get me. About 2 weeks later, I wake up from my nap, and I sit straight up on the couch, and I'm looking right at Buster. And he just wags his tail, and then he just vanishes. And that was my first experience with a ghost per se.
So
Now, just a few years after that, roll the clock forward, Daddy had a really good friend named Wayne Orr. He lived right there on Bear Creek Road in Mooresville.
I knew
And
one.
Daddy was going to go see Wayne. He was fixing to leave to go to Egypt. And Daddy hadn't seen him in a while. They went to school together. So the whole time, Daddy is we're in the truck. I'm sitting beside Dad. Wayne has walked up to the driver's window. Daddy's rolled the window down, and we're talking. And the whole time, I'm pecking Daddy's leg like this because I'm looking at Wayne. And all I see is this white, vibrant white aura of light all around his body. I can barely see his face. And I'm pecking Daddy, and finally he pops me really hard. And Wayne said, "Don't hit that baby." I remember this clearly. And finally I stopped and settled down. And when we left, Daddy said, "What the hell, sissy?" I said, "Daddy, you're never going to see him again," because he was all white light.
Yep.
The next day, Wayne died. He went into an empty tanker in Egypt to go after 3 of his men that had fallen in and died from fumes, and he was killed as well.
He was trying to save somebody else. My dad hunted with him. Didn't he have a red and white truck?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think so. I believe he did. And he hunted a lot. He had pet raccoons. He was cool. I love him.
I remember him. I barely remember him, but that was
But we saw him the day before he died, and I told my daddy. And then Daddy, when I was 16, Daddy was leaving for work. He worked in Louisiana, of course, living in Lewisburg, so it was a really long drive. He worked a week on and a week off. He was working on the oil fields. He had this really small compact car that he was driving. And right as he was getting ready to leave, I turned to look at him and say, "I love you." And I just froze and screamed at him, "Stop." And he said, "Cece, what's wrong?" I said, "That same white light is around you that was around Wayne. Please, please, I beg you, don't leave tonight." And he wouldn't listen because he wanted to go see his girlfriend. So he left. And the next day, he went to sleep, driving down the Natchez Trace, and woke up chasing a deer down a ditch. His car went airborne, and he plowed into a tree. And they brought him home a week later in an ambulance. Broke up really bad. Changed his whole life.
Pretty bad, Rick. Yeah.
This is why it's important to talk to people, because you just reminded me of something that I don't know if I've maybe told 1 or 2 people in my life. There's 2 people I went to school with, and let me ask you something. That white light you saw,
it's their soul light. They're getting ready
it was you could see through it, but did it make them look pale?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm not going to mention any names, but I've seen that twice in my life. Both vehicles were coming to me, and for some reason I focused on the person's face in the vehicle. It was pale. It had like a almost like you took the color out a little bit, and I could see the faces. It's 2 different times. I could see the faces so clear, because usually you can't through a windshield,
Right.
And
you can when they're as bright as this light on my phone.
The first one,
it makes them that bright.
For some reason, I looked at him and I watched him in the rearview mirrors and went through, and I had this odd feeling. And I think within a couple of weeks, he had passed away in an accident, and it happened to me again. And that time, I thought, that's odd, because that looks like the last time I saw. And I remember sleeping on the couch. I had gotten burned really bad, and was sleeping there because I could elevate my leg and stuff. And I remember the phone ringing, And this guy that I'd seen a couple weeks before like that, and I thought it looked the same, he had an accident and passed away. They were both young. And I've never told Don that. I mean, I've never.
You were saying their spirit getting ready to transcend from this life into a energetic body to cross over.
Why do you think some of us are able to? Which I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was odd.
We're born with that part of our mind awake, and certain instances come about in our lives to trigger us to use it. Some of it comes naturally. Sometimes it's very traumatic for it to happen. Mine, I've had it all my life. So,
do you think we can turn it off and on, or shut it down?
Off. I think fear and faith and belief will turn it off. I think everyone's born with it, but if you're told it's make believe, then you're going to turn it off and never use it. If you're one of those that had an imaginary friend, and I had one, and he was blue, and he was actually an alien, but I didn't know that. But he was my imaginary friend, I thought, but he was really there, and he was when I was at the White House, just so you know. But he had blue skin, black hair, hung around. I saw him once with the Sasquatches in the woods behind the house. But Daddy and Mama and my grandparents for so many years said it's imagination. It's not really there. Just own and own and own and own. Daddy was doing it trying to protect me. He didn't want me involved in what he was dealing with.
Right.
It didn't work. But that part of me started to shut down. And I started to think, well, maybe these adults are right. Maybe what they're telling me is right and what I'm seeing is wrong. But that other part of my mind was going, what you're seeing is real. He can pinch me. He can pull my hair. He can push me on the swing.
Wow.
He can help me catch a horse and lead it to the barn to help. He's not make believe. He's real. He's just different from us.
So the other people in your life just couldn't see it, but because maybe of his energy,
his energy, or he was cloaking, but he was allowing me to see him.
Jen was at her father's bedside when he passed away. Tell him what happened there.
He was very, very ill, overcome with an illness that just came up out of nowhere. A few months before, I was awakened suddenly in the bed. I jumped out of the bed, running through the air, ran through a solid glass window that still remained solid. I ran through the air. My feet touched the ground. I continued running. I ran through a steel horse gate, turned, ran to my daddy's house, about 100 yards. There was a big, huge ship sitting at the end of the field, round saucer. Daddy was standing in front of the ship, dancing from foot to foot, because he never did like to be barefoot outside, never. Nothing but his bathrobe. 4 of these Nordic tall whites are on the edge of this ship. He sort of had a lip that lowered down, and they were standing on it, right at the edge of it. And right as I turned around the corner, I was running to Daddy, a big dark-headed one that I had met before, the year before, during an abduction. He scooped me up in his arms. He said, "Oh, no, you don't need to hear this. And I just laid my head on his shoulder, and they took me into the ship. But as I was going in, I could hear the older elder saying, "You have not fulfilled your promise to me. Now I'm stuck having to deal with this mess. You promised me that she would be dead by the time I return." Word for word, what I heard. And he said, "You're going to pay."
He was talking about Jennifer. Yeah.
Yeah. Talking about me. So about 2 months later, Daddy gets this strange illness. Don't know where it came from. It was before COVID. This was 2015. Take him to the hospital where he spends a week slowly dying, and it was awful. I mean, Don can tell you he was with him too. And right at the moment of his death, I leaned down and whispered in his ear, "I love you with all my heart. I forgive you everything. But it's time to go home." And I leaned up and looked at him, and his mouth just went just a little bit slack. And this tiny, tiny little spark of light, about the size of a match head, and as bright as an LED light, circled with blue light, came out of his mouth. It came up hesitated like it was looking at me, and then shot out the room, which I realized I had watched my father exit his body. That was his soul light. But the next morning, I'm thinking, okay, this was just a bad dream. I woke up almost in hysterics, still remembering everything that I had seen and heard them say to my father. I couldn't remember anything that happened inside that ship, because inside that ship is just bright white light, just as bright as it can be, and it tends to affect your subconscious and your mind and your ability to remember. So I throw back the sheets, going to get up, thinking, okay, this was just a horrible dream. But I've got mud from my feet to my knees on my pajama pants, and my feet are just covered in it. So somehow I ran through a solid window, through the air until my feet touched the ground, through a fence, and all the way down there to that ship. So I let me know quickly it really happened. And like I said, not long after that, Daddy died, and he had been very healthy. His lungs kept filling with fluid, and they had no idea why. And no matter what they did, they would continue to feel. He literally drowned to death.
I've got a question for everybody. While you were talking, I'm listening, and Don knows this. He can be talking to about something, and 6 months later, a question will pop up. So, anybody that is questioning anything that's been said or whatever, I find myself questioning how, why, what, but this thought ran through my head just now. If any of this sounds, I don't say crazy, but impossible or whatever, I want somebody to tell me how memories work. Their energy, right?
Everything is
They're stored energy. I'm thinking, and so if they are like a hard drive or something like that, and you were talking about forgetting this light that you saw inside the ship, if it's stored energy, it can be corrupted. And I don't say wiped, because we see that in the movies or whatever. But when you're talking, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but stuff starts making sense, and I like it when we have those aha moments or whatever. I don't know what it means, and I don't know why that. I had to write it down. I'm gonna look more into that.
I know that when they took me on my back porch that night, and I had my camera recording, then I caught a glimpse of a wand, a light wand, and it was just as white a light as what's inside the ships. And it came over the back of my head, over top of my head, around my chest, and back over. And it felt like a wave of energy, like right before you touch a hot fence. It's really hot. That's what it felt like. But what it did is it instantly put my mind to sleep. And in the video, I'm being carried off the porch because I'm going to go face down, and I'm moving this way. So I know I'm being moved off of the porch, not by my own legs and arms, because I was completely unconscious. But they know how to manipulate and use light and energy to interrupt the receptors in our brains, the electromagnetic energy that runs through our own brains, and it interrupts it.
Here's something
that shuts down our consciousness completely.
Jennifer has had just out-of-body experiences. I have. We both had near-death experiences.
Right.
And when I was 17, I was in a car wreck and ended up going through the windshield, breaking my neck, and laying out in front of the car with my sister and two friends, all four of us in a 52 Ford. But I remembered floating above the accident scene and looking down. I could see my own body there. I could see everybody else. I could hear and understand everything that they were saying. And then this, like a Google zoom out, it was like I was being pulled out away from planet Earth. And, but I was fully conscious, fully aware. Everything about my own identity, my own memory was still there. And at some point on this trip, I kind of turned to see where I was going, if that was the correct way to put it. And I had the sensation that I was going at the speed of light or whatever. I could see stars drifting past, not like I've been knocked out before where you see stars, it's not that
Right.
that kind of effect.
Kind of like the
And
old TV show Star Trek when they hit hyperspeed or whatever.
exactly,
Kind of-
exactly. That almost describes it. And for whatever brief moment in time was taking place, the thought dawned on me, well, boy, this is what it's like to be dead. You're dead. And up until that moment, there was no fear, there was no pain. It was somewhat euphoric experience until I realized that this is what it's like to be dead. And I remember in my mind or whatever, just kind of screaming out to the universe saying, no, 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 it's not my time. I've got things to do. And immediately everything went back into reverse and I went slamming back into my body, woke up, instinctively grabbed my neck with both hands, like this, walked to the car, lay down in the back seat of my dad's car, who happened to be coming out going to work at that particular moment. And remember being at the hospital, watching the doctor looking at the x-rays and turned to my parents. He said, I don't know why this boy is not dead or paralyzed from the neck down, And make long story short, they came up with an operation that had only been done one time. And when the doctor came in and was telling me about the possibility of doing an operation, whether it would go in and take all the shattered bone out and cut the top of my hip off and put it in, carve it and put it in with a screw. So it's kind of a standing joke. Somebody says you're all screwed up. I said, "Yep, you're right." But when the doctor was telling me about this, I said, "Doc, that sounds great. Let's go ahead and do it." And he said, "Well, you got to understand." He said, "None of us have ever done this before. We're going to be on the phone with the only doctor that has ever done it in New York City." And he said, "There's a chance that you could end up paralyzed from the neck down, or there is a chance that you may not come off the table." But to me, there was no question. I knew when I went out and came back that it was going to be all right. And the operation was successful. I played football the next year after that,
So,
And but
did you feel like you've
here's
been?
the thing.
Sorry. Did you
Here's
feel
what
like
I'm
you've been
trying to get
saved
to.
for some reason?
Do what?
Did you feel like you'd been saved for some reason?
It was almost like I knew that I needed to come back because there were things that I needed to accomplish, and whatnot. But my point is that you were asking, where is memory? What is consciousness? And consciousness is a form of energy that can't be destroyed, can only change form. And I think that's what happens. I don't know how many people are on board with the idea of reincarnation or whatever, but we kind of come and go. We are a spiritual entity ourselves. We choose to inhabit the physical body and go through experiences, in this three-dimensional realm, but then we return back for more schooling or whatever, But this energy transfer is the memory stays with you from lifetime to lifetime, if you want to put it in that perspective. And the idea that the idea is that consciousness exploded into the universe. Consciousness was the supreme creator of the universe, and all of the alien beings that came down to Earth to do whatever they were going to do with us were considered gods because of their level of technology and knowledge that our lower human being minds were not ready for, at that time. But here we're getting this explosion of knowledge coming out, this explosion of awakening, a knowingness, a sense of discernment that probably hadn't been here on this planet for several thousand years. We're in a spiritual warfare right now, and I think this is what's going on, is that some of these alien beings who came here 253, 400,000 years, whoever knows how long, basically considered us to be slaves. And they created a slave system, which we know is the debt system. We won't go too far into that right now. But people like Jen, who've had multiple experiences, it's kind of interesting. And the fact we talked about blood type. And so you've got what, A negative? Is that what you told me?
A negative, negative RH factor.
Right. And
Mother was, daddy wasn't universal. And to my knowledge and all my research, no one else in my family is an RH negative.
My mother was AB negative, and I'm O positive too. So I don't know how that played out, but the thought just went through my mind a minute ago, and I'll have to see if I can catch up with it.
Well, I want to y'all tell a quick story that I've not told many people because what we're talking about. So it can be a long story, but I'll shorten it up. A bunch of us went on vacation. I had an old 68 Plymouth car with a carburetor. During the summer, during the week we were gone, the gas had evaporated. So when we got back, we had to prime the carburetor. Guy in my car, I was like, don't crank it till we say crank it, because it's dangerous. You're pouring a little gas in, it could backfire, and then you got a mess. Well, when I said don't crank it, he thought I said crank it. And right as my buddy's pouring gas, he's got an antifreeze jug full of gas. And if it hadn't been full, it probably killed us. But it backfired when the jug lit the jug up, and my friend, he made a great Marine. He's calm. He's got this plastic jug on fire, and it's like a rocket coming out the top. And he sets it down real gentle. Well, my dumb ass was thinking it's melting and it's fixing to, and I'm thinking it's fixing to burn the car up. But my buddy's in there, and my thought wasn't the car, it was him. So I had shorts on, and I kicked the jug. And when I kicked the jug, there was a ball of fire. Don might have saw it light up his living room. I don't know. But so long story short on that, immediately the pressure's coming up through my clothes, and I get my eyes shut right as the fireball goes past. And I'm on fire on my leg. I've got burns. I've got see this ear right here. I can't do this. This ear, it's this one. See that missing piece right there? Well, it got burned, scabbed over, and fell off. But so I'm in the middle of this fireball, and the first thing you think is stop, drop, and roll. Well, there's fire all over me, all around me. I got my eyes shut, and I'm hurt. It's hurting, and all of a sudden I feel what feel like warm honey, probably endorphins or whatever. I don't know if that's the right word. It goes over my body, and I think the thought was, "This is it. This is how it's going to happen." I don't know which way to go. I can't even see, and all of a sudden, y'all, this cold fingertip, what it felt like, came through that fire and touched me right there on the cheek. And my thought process didn't go, "Oh, there's a cold fingertip there. It's in this direction. I need to run that way." My body did it on its own. I wasn't controlling my body. I ran with my eyes shut between 2 or 3 cars, a tree, past my sister. She didn't even see me. Get out in the yard, and I said, "God, if I can see, I don't care what I look like, and I can handle whatever's coming." And of course, I put my hair out first, and I opened my eyes and I could see, and I was like, "Okay, let's deal with this." Went over there, and you remember we had some good cold water. I was running water on it and everything, but you got to the hospital, went through that whole ordeal. But for 2 weeks, I almost felt like this euphoric feeling, and it wasn't the pain medicine. It was I kept going back to that cold fingertip because that was the way out. And I didn't think, "Hey, this is the." I ran all the way to the front yard with my eyes shut, and I wasn't in control. So I left that horrible ordeal. I was happy, which doesn't make sense. I was in so much pain for weeks, while it was healing up, going to the doctor. But I had this feeling that you don't come out of that like that unless there's a purpose
Right.
somewhere down the road, And I don't know what it was. I still don't. I think when I had my kids, I was pretty sure that was it, but I don't know, and I can't explain it. The way I explained it to myself, maybe it was my guardian angel, but without that, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now because
Right.
my body relaxed, and my thought was, "This is it. I'm gone," and I wasn't scared. I wasn't scared at all, and at that time, here it comes. Let's do it. And then all of a sudden, no, it's not time yet, and whatever. So anyway, I didn't have an out of body experience, but I had something touch me and triggered a reaction to get me to safety. I didn't do it.
Did the old White House when that happened?
What now?
The old White House in Mooresville.
No, I was we were on Globe Road at the time, close to where Don's at. But I did live in that house, and we heard strange noises and stuff. I never saw anything that I remember. I do have some memories. Sometimes it feels like they're trying to come back, but if I don't, I'm not going to say what they would be unless they really come back.
Right.
I feel like it's fighting to come through sometimes, and I pay attention and I try to remember, but then I'll get away from it. So I don't know if something happened there. Somebody in my family saw. I remember this. Out back, there's a little shed or barn in the little field that was little. It went off down the hill just a little bit.
Yeah, Daddy used it as a horse barn.
And somebody saw something brown, big and brown back there, but I was so young, I didn't Bigfoot or anything like that. So I don't remember who it was.
When I was 3, my first memory of actually walking up to a Sasquatch was right behind that barn, and she was a coppery cinnamon brown color. Shut up, phone.
Y'all, I'm gonna tell y'all, the ones that don't know Jen, she's outside. She has activity all the time. There's a fence right behind her. So if something snatches her over the fence and takes off running with her, we can either continue or leave. Either
Well, I set out here deliberately just in case they wanted to act up.
We might get some hoops and howls before the night's over. Who knows?
I know. I heard a few in the creek, but it wasn't close enough for y'all to hear it. I was
Well,
like,
I'm gonna tell y'all this. We're about at 1:15. We can go for a little while longer. We're definitely gonna do this again because there's so much that we can get into. I want y'all, and it'll be at y'all's, when y'all can, y'all if we're not gonna get in a hurry, and this might be something we do once a month or once every 2 months or something if y'all want to, and we might can add some folks, some Marshall County folks. But
and that would be cool. I'd love to hear some of the stories from Marshall County because most of my childhood experiences with the Sasquatch beings, the forest people, was in Marshall County.
Well, the farm. So if you're at that house where you saw your first Bigfoot,
Mm-hmm.
if you walk out the back door, go straight up over that hill right there, and maybe over another one. You know where the power line's at?
That's where I saw her. I had wandered away from the house and picking buttercups, little bee
There's a
poppers, and that's exactly where I was.
there's a small pond back there in the dip.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where I got the report from 5 years ago
Yeah,
in that area.
yeah, and that doesn't surprise me in the least, not at all.
The
And
funny thing, we all lived within a 3 mile radius of each other there for a
Right,
long time. But yeah,
right.
well, it's crazy. Listen to this, Jen. I don't know if I've told you this or Don's told you. So Don's talking about the UFO guy in Lewisburg. What was the guy's name? Lived up in the Rock House.
Stanley Ingram.
Stanley,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Racer,
So
yeah.
here's how everything's connected. I don't know if you've heard this yet or not. So Don was telling me, and he said his name. The name sounded familiar, and he told me, and I'm like, wait a minute, did he live in that rock house right there across from the bowling alley and all that? And he's like, yeah, across the street and 2 houses to the left, that's the house I lived in that was haunted as hell.
See, that's just too coincidental. It really is.
And oh my God.
The reason that Daddy was investigating UFO sightings and encounters like about David Swanner back then with Stanley. Stanley wrote for the Pulaski newspaper, but also his daughter, his oldest daughter, and I won't say her name, was abducted, and it was a horrific experience. I mean, it was just horrific. It was one that she had a terrible time coming to terms with her most of her young adult life. So yeah, that's very, very interesting that you were
she
there right
also
below him, his house.
she also had a run in with a couple of the men in black. Remember that?
Yes, she sure did because of it, because of
Yep.
what happened to her. She sure did.
Well, back in the day when somebody would tell that, everybody would think they're crazy. And we had such crazy stuff happen inside our house. And it was me, I was real young. My mom, my dad, and my aunt. She was like 14 at the time. And she lived with us. And there was so much stuff happening that my dad said, I wonder if it's that crazy guy down there in that rock house doing stuff. And Mom was like, it's inside the house.
He wasn't crazy. He wasn't.
But I know. But see,
but back then he was treated as a fool. Because he was one of the first ones wanting to talk about it. He had an experience where he had actual drawings of the inside of a UFO. Daddy saw them, and I think you did too, didn't you, Don?
Yeah, I was there when David and Dr. Darbro came up from Huntsville. Mm-hmm. And David Swanner, the guy who had an 8th grade education and worked for a pest control company, and had that first experience, the thing that Stanley wrote about as far as having UFO come over and sit down in the field in front of him, and then out walks a Bigfoot, and then thing lifts up and zips off, and Bigfoot takes about 4 steps and he's off in the woods.
Right.
Well, this Dr. Darbro called Stanley, and he said, man, you're crazy. He said, you need to quit writing about this stuff, because Stanley's articles were getting shipped all over the country. People were subscribing to the Pulaski newspaper just to read his articles.
Right.
And so this Dr. Darbro was a space scientist down at Huntsville at Redstone Arsenal. And he called Stanley up and he said, you need to quit writing about this. This is a bunch of baloney. you're doing a disservice to the public by putting this stuff out, which looking back now, here was a government official that I think was doing his dead level best to try to keep it under wraps too. I think
Right.
they have always, well, at least since the 40s, known a lot more than they've ever let on about.
Mm-hmm.
And but when David Swanner sat down and drew the inside of the ship and described the propulsion systems, Darbo's mouth just dropped wide open. And that's when he and Stanley got together and wrote the book, The UFOs over the Tennessee Valley. Do you by any chance still have a copy of that?
Daddy had it.
Charlie did. Yeah.
Daddy had it, and I don't know. I have no idea what they did with all his stuff. But yeah, I remember reading it because Dad had it in his little small library. Yeah, it's almost impossible to find it now.
I looked it up on Amazon, and there was one copy available, and it was like, I don't know, $1,500. Several years ago, it was like $200.
Right.
You know?
Right.
But I mean, it's.
But yeah, Daddy had a copy
still
of
out
it.
there. Right. And I mentioned in the book, GP was mentioned in the book. That was his CB handle.
Yeah,
you know?
Daddy's CB handle was GP, so most everybody knew in the UFO network back then as just GP.
Right.
The paint color of his truck was golden Pinto. He had no Dodge, and he just shortened it to GP for his CB handle. And most people didn't even know him as Charlie. It was just GP. But his first experience with a Sasquatch, with a Bigfoot, was on a UFO.
Yeah.
Sure was. They were using Daddy as a breeder.
Yeah.
And he had vivid memories of it, impregnating their females.
Y'all, that sound, I don't use these words, but y'all know people say, oh, that sounds nuts or whatever. Y'all brought that up. And just this week, I heard on a mainstream podcast where they were talking about some of their friends that had experiences just like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shocked I was shocked at these people that were so famous in the Bigfoot world talking about flesh and blood and all this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, you never know, because this guy here, we trust him and whatever. And he said, stuff like that happened to him. And then they got to talking about these other people and reports. And I'm here to learn. I don't know. I've got an open mind, but sometimes today, I didn't have a shocked reaction when you just said it, but I did today. When I heard it at work, I was listening going down the road. And I'm like, wait, what?
He had vivid memory of being used as a breeder to breed their females. And he said they could mentally make you see anything you wanted to. He said, I could think I was laying there with the most beautiful woman in the universe, but odds are she was a gray.
What's that? Y'all remember The Shining? When the old lady in that room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I firmly believe they follow family lines. They have harassed me my entire life. My brother, who was 50, him as well. My daddy's grandmother, who was half Native American, she had dreams in her entire life of the little people. They would come to her in her dreams. But when she would describe the little people, she was describing the grays. I think it follows family lines. I really do.
Roger's got a little Indian background in his. I've got some in mine.
Doing my genealogy research, trying to figure out where she came from. Her mother's name was Mary Morningstar, and she came from Kunkuska, Alabama, in 1879 to just above Nashville, Tennessee, Clarksville area. And then she died a month after Mammy was born, and then Mammy was adopted by a white family and taken into Kentucky, but she was treated like a slave her entire life. The only thing she was there for was to cook and clean and babysit and be beaten. So she got married really early to another man who was half Native American, who had his grandfather had been a slave, been caught in battle and enslaved by the Cherokee people in North Carolina. And he had earned his freedom by marrying into the tribe. So he was adopted into the tribe. So he was also half Native American, and they married.
My my great whatever, I don't know how many greats back, late 1780s, 1790s. Her name was Lydia Gray Eyes. She married into the family. No, neither side of the family approved, so they moved off by themselves, and had a little boy named Edward. Um, Edward's dad was working in the field, and Lydia went to pick berries or something, and she didn't come back. And Edward had got crying, so I don't remember his daddy's name, which had been kinfolk too, but he gathered up Edward and went looking, and he could see where there was a struggle, and they always thought, and it did. This is what happened. Her people come back and got her, took her back, so they never knew what happened to her. But there's a death certificate in Smithville, Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
and she lived to be, I'm thinking, 80s maybe or longer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and that's on my dad's side. And on my mom's side, I don't have the information, but they're German and Cherokee, and we're all mutts, but I don't know I haven't found out yet, So yeah, when I found out there was a connection, and I told the story about running up on the Cherokee lady in Cherokee, North Carolina, in the woods that had gray eyes, and had a lot of strange things happen during that, after that, missing time, and not only if I'd had missing time, I might have thought, did that just happen? But Peyton was with me, and we confirmed some things, and we had 70 miles missing off the truck in an hour that we couldn't account for.
Yeah, you got missing time. The man sitting right over here on the other screen is one you need to be talking to, because he can help you bring it back. Truly. I'll tell you an interesting coincidence. I don't know where my brain just went. I guess something's blocking me. There it comes back. Morningstar, Mary Morningstar. My great, I guess would be, great grandmother, the one that died right after my great granny was born. Remember, her last name was Morningstar. Well, these things, when they take me, they don't call me Jennifer. They don't call me Jen. They call me Shakara. They say that's my anointed name, Shakara. Well, if you look up the meaning for Shakara, it means the brightest morning star. And what's the coinky dink of that? Is it thrown back to the family line because her name was Mary Morningstar? It just makes me think that they follow families. And why not call me Jen or Jennifer? That's my name. That's my given name. But no, they never have called me that.
Don, we've got a question for you.
Okay.
Vicky Busby says, she asked, Don, how many Bigfoot experiences have you had?
I'm probably the only one in the room that hadn't seen one, but I had one real close that got my attention. Should I go ahead and tell that story real quick?
Or? Oh yeah, because
I love that story.
I was game warden, and one evening, October, clear, beautiful day, kind of warm up during the day and cooling off at night. I went up to Milltown to stake out some property up there that you probably know, Roger, but for spotlighters. And it was a night where the full moon was coming up just as the sun was going down. And so I was standing outside the truck and smoked a cigarette. And off in the distance, I heard this strange sound that at first I thought it was like a bull bellowing. A mad bull, you know how when they're falling the ground and they're all stirred up and whatnot. And didn't think too much about it. It wasn't all that close. And but a few minutes later, the thing squalled out again, and it was close the distance, about half the distance. And I'm guessing at that time it was probably 50 to maybe 75 yards back off in the woods. And that really got my attention. And I got to thinking, there are no cattle in the Bethlehem woods. There wasn't even a fence around the woods at that time. You couldn't drive a fence post in for the rocks anyway, you know.
Still
And
can't.
Bethlehem Woods was at one time a panther was spotted, but that was when I was really young.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I got chased out of Bethlehem Woods by Sasquatch. Well,
Jen, Jen,
it was pacing me beside me, and that's where Daddy had the horses at the time, right across the road from where we lived on South Berlin, and it took me all the way out of those woods. I was about 150 yards in there, and it was 100. That was a long hike to me. I think I was like 13 at the time. It paced me all the way out of the woods. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, hey Jen, you know some
Here's
of the
the
audio and
connection
video
again.
that I've had lately. Some
Huh?
of the audio and video I've had lately, and some of the stories I've told.
Yeah.
Guess where it was at?
Was it Bethlehem Woods? That's hysterical. Yeah, Daddy, it was my job as a teenager after we moved to South Berlin to feed the horses every day. Well, Granddaddy didn't have room in his barn because he had steers. So Daddy had leased some land across the South Berlin Road, which was part of the Bethlehem Woods. And he'd leased about 30 acres. And it was heavily wooded. And we had to go in there about 150 yards to the spot where it was to feed the horses. And it was nothing for me to have every hair on the back of my body just stand up when you just know you're being watched. But there was 2 occasions to where I was literally paced out of there. I would stop and I'd hear step, and then I would start back and I would stop and I would hear step. So I knew I was being pushed back out of those woods. Now both those nights too. Also, the horses wouldn't come up.
How long ago was that?
Oh, I was a teenager. I was probably 13.
So me and Don looked on Google Earth, and where he had that experience with the screams, and he jumped in the truck and left.
Mm-hmm.
Anna says people run when I talk Bigfoot. Same with you guys. Usually I got them trapped in my work van and they can't go nowhere, and then I let them out and then they run.
Kids, because my kids have experienced just as much as I have.
But yeah, we looked. It's 1.3 miles from where we have had those experiences to where Don had his, and I don't know if we're considered Bethlehem Woods, but we're really close.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember that I was talking. Was trying to figure out, and we figured out that it was a young male juvenile that screamed at us here about a month or so ago. That's where it was at.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to think that they've seen a really gigantic male Sasquatch if he's 7 or 8 feet tall. No, you've seen a kid. You've seen a teenager, because they get a lot bigger than that.
I've seen
going to be a lot bigger than that.
Mine was about 7.5 foot, best we could measure, and he looked very athletic. And I just for years I'm like, that doesn't look like Patty. That didn't look like this or that. And I've got some friends that have evidence on their phones that they won't show anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shown a picture about 2 months ago. I'm not sending it to you, but you can look at it from a trail cam. It's 7 feet away at the most. There's nothing in between the camera and this thing. And I saw tendons and veins and muscle fibers through the hair. And I didn't know what to say at first, because I said, y'all have heard me tell what I saw for all these years. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
The athletic, just looked like a NFL linebacker that was probably 2 foot taller than a NFL linebacker and a lot bigger. And I didn't know what to say. I mean, I want Peyton to meet those guys. We'll have to do that later, so he can see the picture. And I told him, I said, when you see this thing, when you see this picture, there's going to be. It's not AI. It's not. It's not something you can find on the internet. And I said, when you see this thing, it's going to change your mind about maybe wanting to actually physically see one.
Well, you've seen the picture.
I was lucky enough.
Alan, he's all teeth, but a picture is never going to be enough for most people. To mainstream researchers, a picture is never going to be enough. They want a body, and they're not going to get a body unless they were in war.
Yeah, so you the one
that's pictures and the blood samples and hair that they've been collecting. Seriously, most people, I don't care how good the picture is or how good the video is, somebody's going to scream AI or CGI or it's a shadow.
Yeah.
It can be standing right there, and they're going to do it because they want to believe, but they want the absolute proof, and the absolute proof is a body. Well, these things are much more intelligent than we are. So you go for a body of one of these things. You're taking a mate, you're taking a father, or you're taking a brother, or you're taking a baby to a very intelligent spiritual being that has abilities that humans have yet to master.
Did you happen to see the documentary on the Mount St. Helens explosion and
Yep.
the male Bigfoot was in the
Yep.
Jeep with the military and he was identifying the bodies and it was so sad and just
And
melancholy and
bad.
just
Yeah, and I
yeah.
believe it totally. I believe it's how I remember back in 2001 when I first read about it, the first one when we were just really getting good on the internet. And I remember reading that and printing it off and taking it to my brother and saying, "Read this." And he said, "Oh, that's real." I said, "It sure is." I fully
And
believe that big male sass was in that Jeep with that army individual going around from cave to cave looking for his family, which were all deceased.
when Mike Bluler had that one in his crosshairs and was scared to death and he still couldn't pull the trigger because he said of the emotion and the human like um features, but I think it was the intelligence he said in the eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and he's military trained, so he's been 4 tours in Iraq and scared to death and still couldn't pull the trigger because this thing is standing there unarmed and he felt like he'd be doing something wrong
Mm-hmm.
because of the facial features and the emotion in the face, I guess
Yeah.
maybe.
A lot of the photographs and the artwork you see of Sasquatch and Bigfoot is off. The eyes are
Yeah,
off. The face is off. They're trying to make it look too apish. It's not an ape.
yeah.
Sasquatch, Sabe, Bigfoot, forest people, whatever you want to call them, they are not primates.
Well, Kevin Wright from Marshall County, you've seen his encounter on a couple of our shows.
Mm-hmm.
I asked him a question, and he was 20 yards from this thing as a young teenager, and him being able to see the face and telling us, I think Peyton did in chat. He wanted to know if it had the more triangle nose like a gorilla, or was it more like ours? And he said it was more like ours. He said it was wider,
Right.
but anything with that much mass has to take in more oxygen, right? To get to
Right.
the muscles to run and use them. So it makes sense that the nostrils were bigger. He said, but it was shaped more like ours and came over and not like a gorilla's. And
Exactly.
he was looking him right in the face. So
I've
I
looked
mean,
several of them right in the face. I got
I know
I got
I don't
shot.
want to get you started because I know we'll be here to but
I mean, I was a foot from her. She was sitting on her butt on the ground, and I was taking in everything. Yeah, they
so
do not look like an ape.
so
And that
y'all
intelligence, they're not apes.
so y'all in chat and people that'll watch this later, here's what we're going to do. We got started with we did UFOs tonight. We won't have a set thing we talk about if there's something new that comes up, but the next one we do will be geared more towards Bigfoot, if that's what y'all want to do that. And because this group right here, we could talk about anything, I imagine, but we're at 138. Let's end it here. And everybody, if you hadn't subscribed, and some of you have, I see that. I appreciate it. That's just gonna help me grow the channel and get a lot of good content to you. Get better equipment eventually. And I'm going to take a break and I'm going to go over to Woodwalkers. I put it I didn't have a link, but it's WOOD Walkers with a Z. And at 9:00, they've been out in Alabama this whole week. They've been down close to Coombo Baker's house, Greg House's property, where there's a lot of activity. They said they got some cool stuff to share with everybody. I think they had video last time, they had audio. So take you a break and then go over in about 20 minutes. And I'll be there in chat and I'll get to talk to y'all more. Yeah, and they are funny. David, you're right. They take the subject seriously, but it is hilarious. And I'll be in chat. I'll be acting stupid. So I can't wait to see what they've come up with this week. But Jen, Don, thank you, y'all. I mean, I've been looking forward to this. I don't have a set night I'm gonna do things, but I'll make sure y'all, have time, and we have to do it a little early because Jen says she gets tired at 9:30. And
I'm a granny. I'm not even as young as I used to be.
if you drink as much coffee as Don does, you'd be,
Hey, that stuff put me to sleep.
There you go. Hey, Jen, I want to ask you something real
Sleep puts
quick.
me right out. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. I love Don, and I think the world of you too. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. Don's got a question for you.
Are you the one that put the CGI of the Bigfoot grabbing the gal and running off? And
No.
who put that up there?
When I was going to ask Jen, because we had said maybe this week, nothing was written in stone. And I was like, I'm going to ask Jen and Don, see if they can come on Friday. And I was playing with that AI app. And I'm like, hold on a second. And I typed in little girl. I typed in little girl handing Bigfoot a flower. And that's what popped up. And I thought, that's pretty cool. So I sent it to her. I said, I made you something. And y'all, you'll hear that story next time. But yeah.
My friends are in chat. I just imagine Vicky is one of them.
She's probably heard it a few times.
Oh yeah, probably.
What
I don't
I
think
was thinking of was not your picture, Roger, but I was thinking Jen had posted it or one of her sites there is a Bigfoot looking at him from behind. You would think he was a football linebacker, and he had this lady had his arm wrapped around her, and he was running off with her, and she was grinning.
I don't know. I might have. I know there's one of us female Bigfoot running off with a male.
I've learned to expect anything from Jen's Facebook.
Exactly. I have to keep it really clean with Bigfoot stuff because I've got 8 grandchildren. And one of those sons of mine, he doesn't want me influencing his older children. So I'm just like, okay, that's fine with me. Anybody else may get on my Facebook just to laugh. But every once in a while, I'll post something.
Let's go take bathroom breaks and meet up at Woodwalkers.
All right, buddy.
All right, sounds good. Right. Appreciate you having us on, Roger.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Thank y'all.
Love you.
See you, Ben. Love you,
y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.